Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a really important topic, and a lot of folks in the community have a lot of interest about what we're going to be discussing today. We have folks from ITF here, and we also have Kelly Maynard from the Little Hercules Foundation, and then Rachel Schrader will be presenting from PPMD on some of our resources. So to get it started, I'm going to pass it over to Scott. But actually, before that, if you have questions, you can send them in through the chat, and we're going to do a Q&A at the end, but feel free to type them in throughout the presentation and we'll address them at the end. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everybody for joining us today. It's my pleasure to walk through the introduction to Duvyzat or Duvyzat. I'm Scott Baber. I'm the head of medical affairs here at ITF Therapeutics. Following my presentation, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Stephanie Trafton, who is the head of our access team here at ITF Therapeutics. So let's get started, and we can forward the slide one, please. And before getting into the crux of the presentation, which really is just an overview of Duvyzat, and we'll talk about how we think Duvyzat works. We'll go through high-level data that led to the approval of Duvyzat here in the US by the FDA, and walk through some important safety information prior to turning it over to Stephanie. To start, I want to state that Duvyzat is an HDAC inhibitor. It's indicated for the treatment of Duchenne muscular dystrophy in individuals who are 6 years of age or older. And Duvyzat is a first of its kind non-steroidal treatment option for individuals with all genetic variants of DMD. So next slide, please. So before getting into the clinical trial data, I want to take a few minutes or a little bit to talk about how we think Duvyzat or Duvyzat might work in Duchenne. So we know that the lack of functional dystrophin results in muscle loss, but we also know that there is a host of pathology that comes with the lack of functional dystrophin beyond muscle loss, and that includes inflammation. It includes the inability for the muscle to repair itself, and it includes scarring and fat tissue deposit where the muscle should be coming back during where it should be repairing itself. What we think and what we've seen in preclinical studies and in animal models, and including we also saw in early studies of individuals living with Duchenne, is that if we were able to block a protein called histone deacetylase, or HDAC, with what we call an inhibitor or an HDAC inhibitor, we're able to improve inflammation by decreasing it. We're also able to improve the repair mechanisms. So we see that muscle actually is able to come back. And that is also something that we see where we see a reduction in the scarring and fatty tissue while we see those repair mechanisms improving. So what we need to determine is whether or not that great result that we see in animal models, and again, in early models or early studies of individuals living with Duchenne, did we actually see that in a large phase 3 clinical trial? And if we go to the next slide, we can see the pivotal phase 3 EPIDYS trial. This was our largest study investigating Duvyzat, investigating both the effectiveness and the safety to really determine whether or not it was effective and safe in individuals living with Duchenne. It was an 18-month randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, and included 179 individuals who had a confirmed diagnosis of Duchenne, and they were randomized to receive 66% of them, the participants received Duvyzat, while the other third received placebo. And they received either Duvyzat or placebo by oral liquid suspension, and they received it twice daily. So a couple of key inclusion criteria for this study. and a little bit of results is that while the study individuals needed to be 6 years of age or older, the range of ages was between 6 and 15 years of age, and the mean age was about 10 years old. So all individuals, they needed to be ambulatory, and they needed to be able to get up from the floor within 10 seconds. And then they also needed to be able to complete the 4-stair climb. They needed to do this 2 times, and they had to do it with at least between 3 seconds and or at least 3 seconds and less than 8 seconds. The final important key entry criteria is that all individuals needed to be on a stable dosage of corticosteroids prior to joining the study, and they needed to remain on that dose of corticosteroids throughout the 18-month period. So next slide. So what we're seeing here is in the table is our primary efficacy outcome, which was change from baseline to month 18 in the 4-stair climb test. What you can see is the Duvyzat or Duvyzat participants on the top of the table and the placebo participants on the bottom. The first column here, what we can see is that the mean baseline 4-stair climb in seconds was about the same, so 3.39 and 3.48 seconds for the Duvyzat and placebo groups respectively. And then there was a change of 1.25 seconds for individuals who were receiving Duvyzat and a 3.03 second change in individuals that were receiving placebo. So it took individuals longer to climb 4 stairs that were on the placebo group as a group. This difference was about 1.78 seconds and was statistically significant. So in addition to reaching our primary efficacy outcome, we also showed that there was a 40% difference between that Duvyzat and placebo. So this change was about 40% difference. Key secondary endpoint, so the North Star Ambulatory Assessment, what we see is that consistent with what we saw with our primary efficacy outcome, that there was a difference. It was nominally significant, but not statistically significant. So there was less decline on the North Star Ambulatory Assessment for individuals that were receiving Duvyzat compared to placebo. Next slide, please. So importantly for safety, as part of the EPIDYS clinical trial, the adverse reactions, the most common adverse reactions were diarrhea, abdominal pain, thrombocytopenia, and nausea, vomiting, hypertriglyceridemia, and pyrexia. So importantly for the safety outcomes, only 2% of individuals discontinued because of adverse reactions. We saw in the study that temporary treatment interruption and subsequent dose modification, if it was needed, that proved useful for the management of the majority of adverse reactions in EPIDYS. And most adverse reactions were reported as mild to moderate in severity. Next slide, please. So important safety information is that we want to highlight here is that Duvyzat can cause low platelet counts in your blood, known as thrombocytopenia. We also have seen an increased levels of fat or triglycerides in your blood, and there are frequent watery loose stools or diarrhea and vomiting. And before taking Duvyzat, make sure you tell your healthcare provider about all your medical conditions, including if you have any heart problems or take any medications that could increase a chance for irregular heart rhythms or have any bleeding problems. Next slide, please. Furthermore, make sure you tell your healthcare provider about all medicines that you take. And Duvyzat can cause serious side effects, including changes in electrical activity of your heart called QT prolongation. So with that, I am happy to turn to the next slide and turn it over to Stephanie Trafton.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Scott. I'm Stephanie Trafton. I am the head of market access at ITF. I'm really happy to have the chance to talk to everybody today to introduce, if you haven't already worked with our ITF ARC program, to just talk about the resources that we have available and then where to find some additional information online. And what I really love about this program is just that, you're able to hear the stuff that we are able to offer, but then there is just so much more from our friends at PPMD and Little Hercules. And so it's just a nice big overview of everything that's out there to support folks if they want to get started. So our ITF ARC program is our comprehensive patient support program. We have a dedicated set of case managers that you would work with, and we work with both patients and caregivers as well as with the providers directly. In order to be enrolled, your physician would complete our start form, and I'll show you where you can find that. But our start form is all of your information as well as a prescription. And by submitting that start form, that enrolls you in the ITF ARC program. The process would begin on the left with a review of your insurance. So we want to determine what it is that your insurance will require in order to approve Duvyzat, so usually called a prior authorization. Note that it can be very common in these early days to get denials up front, and we expect that. And so we will work with your physician to submit the necessary paperwork. We will then work with them on any subsequent appeals or any other engagements that they can have directly with the insurance company in order to ensure that we're able to do everything we can to support the desire to start on Duvyzat. We do have several what we've called access solutions in the middle here. This is a host of both financial support as well as free drug programs. For those who have commercial or private or employer sponsored insurance, those folks will be eligible for our commercial copay program where people pay nothing. So if you get an approval and you have an out-of-pocket requirement, we can pay that down to $0. So that's certainly something that anyone with commercial insurance can take advantage of. There's no need to enroll in the program. It'll all be automatically provided as you work through with ITF ARC and with our specialty pharmacy. We do also have a temporary free drug program called Quick Start, and this is important because it does allow patients the opportunity to get started on Duvyzat while sometimes this insurance process is taking a while. And so that program allows a couple months worth of Duvyzat to be provided free of charge. And again, while you're able to get started on therapy, we're able to continue to work with your provider and with your insurance company on the approval process. Ultimately, if anyone is uninsured or if we get to the end of the road with the insurance and you're denied, we do have a patient assistance program, which is really just a longer-term free drug program. That program does, of course, have some eligibility requirements, but we could work through that with you and see if you might be eligible for that if we get to that point, we're not able to obtain coverage. I won't go through all the education and adherence, but rest assured that we've got both our care coordinators as well as pharmacists who will be able to speak with you if you have any questions about getting started on Duvyzat. So any questions at all, please just call that ITF ARC number. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot of our duvyzat.com website. I wanted to highlight right in the middle here, it says the patient start form. That is the downloadable form. Physicians may have just printed forms as well in the office that they can use. But this is the form that I said would be essentially the way to enroll in ITF ARC and to also submit your prescription to the pharmacy. At the top there where it says patient support, there are a bunch of different drop-down. And there are some other resources there, like our ITF ARC patient brochure that is available in both English and Spanish. I should have mentioned that for the start form, it's also, you can see there's a download for English. There's also one for Spanish if that's a need. And then there's the opportunity to sign up for additional updates. As you know, we're recently launched, so we should be having quite a bit of updates in the future in terms of additional content. So it's always useful to sign up for that, and that way we can let you know when those are available. Next slide. Here's just an image of Duvyzat, and of course it's now available, so please just discuss with your provider if you have any questions. You can also dial the ITF ARC number, which can be found on the website as well. That phone number, of course, we don't get started on the process until we have a prescription, but we can certainly answer any questions that you might have prior to that. Next slide. And here's the opportunity to provide us with some additional feedback, as well as another way to learn more about ITF. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Rachel at PPMD.
Hey there. Thanks, Lauren. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel. I am part of the team at PPMD. I am on our care team, and I have the privilege of working with a really great group of folks who have developed and then are able to really facilitate access to a lot of really neat resources that we have available. So I am going to ask that we go to the next slide, and we're going to dig into what some of these resources look like. So I know this first image here is just a screenshot of our website, but I think sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to find what you're looking for. So when we're looking at this screen, this is our landing page. If you navigate to the care section and then go over to that next heading by the blue number 2, that access and coverage resources, that is going to be how you access our access and coverage resources on our website. And there is a slew of resources available there for you, whether you're looking at access and coverage related to DME, to services, to therapies, etc. So for the purposes of today's conversation, we're really thinking about access to new therapies. So if you navigate to care, access and coverage, and then click on new therapies, you're going to see an image that looks quite similar to this next screen. If we want to go ahead and advance to the next slide. So when you go to that portion of our website, you're going to see a ton of different links and information, as well as a really helpful overview about the access landscape. And I know Stephanie kind of talked about the different phases that they think about in terms of access from an ITF ARC perspective. But what we've done is really built out the access pathway in a few different stages. So that stage 1 is really, when your doctor writes a prescription and they submit it to insurance for that prior authorization. Then you move into stage 2, and that is the stage during which the patient, the drug company, and the doctor are all working back and forth with that insurer to process that prescription. So this might look like a prior authorization with a letter of medical necessity. This could look like an appeal, a series of denials, all sorts of different back and forth that Kelly Maynard from Little Hercules is going to talk a little bit more in depth about. And once that process has been completed, you're then at stage 3. That's when the drug is provided to the patient, you get that shipment to your home, and you start your medication. So we think about access sort of in that framework of these different levels and different stages that we work through. From there, we think about different resources that are available that are specific to the drug that you're trying to access. So if you go to this portion of the website and you scroll down, you'll see these therapy-specific resources. And what we've done is created this really cool menu where you can navigate through each of the approved therapies in the Duchenne landscape right now. And then if you click that little plus sign, it's going to expand out to show you a different suite of resources that we have available. And then those are broken down into stage, so you can find the right type of resource for the right time, depending on where you are in that process. So here you'll see we've built out this Duvyzat section. This is a living document where we continue to add resources, we update it when we have new information available, and we try to keep it really up to date and robust so that it's a nice place to land when you're looking for help in terms of getting access to a new medication or even continued access during that reauthorization period. So here you'll see there's a few different links that you can go to be helpful In the access pathway, there is information about the actual FDA approval. You can go to the label itself. We have an FAQ that we've developed and keep updated with information about the drug itself and about the access. And then there's even a sample letter of medical necessity there that you can use to help guide your communication with your insurance company to advocate for an approval. Then if you look down a little bit further, you'll see those stage 2 resources. That first link there is to the Little Hercules Foundation. I'm not going to steal Kelly's thunder. She's going to tell you all about the services that they offer. But then there's a few other relevant publications that you can use to help make your case and some other things there to consider and check out. Like I said, we'll make sure to keep that updated. We'll add to it. And keep that as relevant as possible for you, no matter where you are in your process. All right, and then let's go to the next stage. Perfect. I'm going to change gears just slightly and make a plug for our PPMD for You program. Some of you on the phone might have engaged with us through PPMD for You before, but if you haven't, I want to make sure that you know that this resource is available. And this is a really cool program that we launched here a couple years back and is really spearheaded by my teammate Alexis, whose picture is down there on the bottom and the left. And it really facilitates easy access to experts on the PPMD team to talk about specific issues related to diagnosis, care coordination, genetics, but specifically for this conversation, navigating your resources and benefits. I don't know about you all, but I have found that understanding my own healthcare benefits can be really confusing and daunting and difficult to understand. So if you are ever looking to understand your own benefits, if you're trying to figure out if a drug is, on your insurance company's formulary, if there are exclusions, what copay percentages might look like, any sorts of details around those topics, you can go to this landing page. That website is linked down there for you to see. It's also kind of like a little button that hovers in the lower right-hand corner on our website. And you can click that green opportunity there that's labeled Navigating Resources and Benefits. And if you do that, you'll have time set aside to connect with either Alexis or Brian, who is our community engagement coordinator. And they'll be able to connect with you and give you really personalized, specific one-on-one information, helping you to understand your benefits, not just general broad strokes information that you might find elsewhere on our website. So I think between these different resources, both, those access pages, PPMD for You, the great resources available through the ITF ARC program, we're able to really build a suite of support for families to navigate, but we also recognize that sometimes that is simply not enough. We've tried to give you all of these resources to make things accessible and to make it simple, but sometimes we really have to bring in the heavy hitters, and that's where Kelly and her team at Little Hercules come in, and we're so grateful for her. And so with that, I am actually going to turn things back over to Lauren and to Kelly.
Just right to Kelly.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Kelly Maynard here, Little Hercules Foundation. For those that don't know me, I have a 17-year-old son with Duchenne, and when he was diagnosed, I was working for the insurance regulator of the state of Ohio. Next slide, please. And I'm sorry, my dogs are barking, and I knew the timing was going to be this. But anyway, I hope everyone can hear me. So what can you expect when you ask for help from Little Hercules Foundation? PPMD does a great job of making resources available to the community if they want to take this and do this on their own. But as Rachel said, sometimes these can get very, very complex very quickly, and they're stressful. So we offer one-on-one help to every applicant that applies for help from us. So what we do is we help patients and caregivers get timely access to medically necessary treatments and care. We post all health insurance policies for all treatments on our Facebook page, which many of you have engaged with and sent us inquiries about. Keep those coming. Every applicant is assigned a case manager with relevant expertise to their application, what they're requesting help with. We provide direct support from beginning to end. Hopefully this means approval, and that is the case in well over 95% of our cases. But that's always the goal, as quickly as possible. So we will review your coverage and your plan document with you and explain the process. We will write draft appeal letters for you. The goal is to take that time off your plate because we all know how busy we are. We work with your clinic in a complementary manner because we don't want anything we do over here to, upset any deadlines or anything like that that's going on. And we will also do direct engagement with your payer, and we've done direct engagement with payers since 2016 when we got our first drug approved. We will also explore eligibility with you for Medicaid or waiver coverage if applicable. Next slide, please. We also ensure that your external review rights are exhausted and a final determination is made by a relevant clinical expert, not a foot surgeon or a thoracic surgeon or something ridiculous like that. In addition, we'll support you with filing a complaint. And this is a very, very important step that we ask every one of our applicants to do. We encourage you all to file a complaint with the regulatory authority, either the state insurance commissioner or the Department of Labor, who regulates in self-insured employer plans, which many of you, that's how you get your healthcare insurance. We will also prepare for and attend a Medicaid fair hearing as your advocate representative if you would like us to. We'll follow your lead on that. We will also help you contact your state and federal elected officials. A lot of times we've been successful in getting your elected officials to do a legislative inquiry and figure out why your child is being denied a treatment or care or some kind of service. We will also help you engage with your employer if self-insured. We know there's a lot of apprehension about going to your employer, trying to get access to one of these treatments that tend to be very expensive. So we can assist with that. We get a lot of questions about doing petitions. I just want to say, I think we need to be really careful with petitions. They can work very well if they go viral. If they don't, they tend to really fall flat and not get the attention. So we're always open to talk about that and see if it's a good thing for your particular circumstances. And again, our goal is to get a yes as quickly as possible so that treatment plan can get started. Next slide, please. So some final thoughts before I turn it back over. It is crucial to apply as soon as you receive your first denial, whether that be from a private health plan, Medicaid, Medicare, however you get your coverage. Again, our efforts are meant to be complementary, and we really want the patient and caregiver voice to be represented in this external review process. I just want to mention, I know a lot of you have come with us with questions about, if my child's been dosed on gene therapy, should I pursue other therapies? It's so expensive. I want, and this is, if there's nothing else you take away from what I'm saying today, it is this: you and your provider together have every right to determine and pursue the best treatment and care plan, regardless of the cost of the treatment, regardless of how many combination therapies your provider decides is the best care plan. Also, you don't need to wait for your health plan to issue a policy on a particular treatment. We see medical exceptions happen all the time before health plans have issued policies. And regardless of your policy language, payers cannot deny medically necessary treatments or care, okay? I want to repeat that. I know a lot of people get scared when their health plan comes up with a policy, and it seems as if they won't cover it. A lot of times what these payers do is they will limit access. They will really limit access that isn't as broad as the label. Our goal is to get to an expert that says this isn't what the label says, that this is what the FDA approved it for, therefore it's medically necessary. However, payers are permitted to establish prior authorization criteria, which is where we see a lot of the denials come in the initial stage. So it's really critically important, excuse me, to stick with the process and all the way through the end. And last slide, please. This is a link to our application. Once you apply to us, it's received by an intake manager who will then assign it to the appropriate staff member here. And there's our contact information, our general inbox if you want to send us any questions. And back to Lauren, I think.
Yes, thank you, Kelly, and to the rest of the panelists. That was great. And I know I already see some questions coming in, and some came in throughout the presentation. So I'm glad we have time to answer some of them. So let's get right into it. The first question I want to ask, which this is going to be directed to ITF, what type of long-term monitoring do you guys plan to do for folks on Duvyzat?
Are you talking about, just to clarify, the monitoring that's within the USPI or study?
Study.
Okay. Right now we have an open label extension period as part of our long-term extension study for EPIDYS. Our individuals who have enrolled into our phase 2 study are also included in that long-term extension. And we have an ongoing phase 3 study that is being conducted outside of the US in individuals who are non-ambulant, and they will also be followed long-term as well.
Okay, great. The next question is, can I take Duvyzat if I have a diagnosis of Becker or a different dystrophy?
So Duvyzat is approved for individuals who are 6 years of age or older who have a confirmed diagnosis of Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Are there any studies planned or underway to expand the label to include individuals with Becker or those who are younger than 6?
So when we have announced our clinical development program, we're happy to come back and walk you through when we do have our planned clinical development studies that we'll be enrolling. We'll be happy to share with the community.
Great. I know Stephanie had mentioned the free drug program if someone is waiting for coverage. Would you mind explaining if someone could still get that if they're on Medicaid, and also how long can folks access this free drug? Is there a time limit? Is time constraint? Just a little more details on that would be great.
Sure. Yes. So anybody with any type of insurance can be eligible for our temporary supply program called Quick Start. The criteria for becoming eligible is that your physician has submitted the initial prior authorization and that there is a decision that's still pending with the payer. And that decision needs to be pending for at least a minimum of 5 business days. So at that point, once it's been pending for that period of time, you would become eligible for Quick Start. What we would do is we would send out a month's worth of medication for free, and then you would be eligible for up to another month. So it's 2 months that it's limited to. At that point, we would evaluate what other options we have. Hopefully, and usually what we see is that 60 days is enough time to work through the insurance process, so long as we're submitting all the information relatively quickly. So usually at that point, we'll know whether your insurance has covered and you can continue on with approved or commercial therapy. If not, we can then evaluate you for our longer-term free drug program, which I mentioned, called our Patient Assistance Program. There is a financial requirement for a longer-term program, but that is something that we can certainly answer more questions for you if you have those, if you want to dial into ITF ARC.
Thank you. There's been a few questions about coverage outside or access outside of the US. I don't know if you guys have any details on folks who are in other countries or internationally when they might be able to get access to this drug.
Scott, you want me to take that?
Sure.
It's not, unfortunately, there's not a lot to say, but we are currently under review with the European Medicines Agency, the EMA. So hoping to launch in Europe I don't know the exact timeline, so I won't even say exactly what that might be, but suffice to say that's in process. We don't have information right now beyond Europe. What we can say is that for folks looking to access Duvyzat, you do have to have a prescription from a US-based physician, but we are not able to ship drug outside of the US. So that's pretty much the extent of what we're able to answer on those questions.
Thank you. And then I'm assuming there's a few questions about if the Quick Start program will be accepted from outside of the US. That is, I'm assuming, a TBD too on.
It's not available outside of the US right now. As to whether a program like that would be available when we are ultimately approved in other regions, I'm not able to answer that question because I just don't know.
Okay. Are there GI side effects ongoing, or just as the patient is getting used to the therapy, or just as they're starting the therapy?
Yeah, so GI side effects generally happen early on in the therapy, most commonly in the first 2 months of therapy initiation.
Thank you. What about the other side effects? Do they tend to also decrease with time? So there were folks asking about the other ones as well.
Yeah, so diarrhea, abdominal pain, yes, I would say with thrombocytopenia, those would, when they start, I think that's something that when you're working with your physician, having the conversations with your physician, that's something where you need to reduce the dose. We have that in our US prescribing information of what the dose is and then what the recommended dose reduction. That generally is dependent on the dose you're on and whether or not your platelets decrease and when we get to stabilization. And in addition, triglyceridemia, hypertriglyceridemia, so the increase in triglycerides, that again is something that you would need to work with your treating physician to understand a dose reduction as well.
Thank you. There's been a few questions about taking exon skipping drugs along with Duvyzat or other steroids along with Duvyzat. Do you guys have any information on what's recommended or what shouldn't or should be done regarding that?
Most importantly, you need to have the conversation with your prescribing physician. It's just to be clear, when it comes to exon skippers, gene therapy, it is not contraindicated with respect to Duvyzat, but it's important to make sure that you're having that conversation with your treating physician. With steroids, that is just to set the stage that within our study, individuals who were treated in EPIDYS, they needed to be receiving a stable dose of steroids as they came into the study and be committed to remaining on that dose of steroids throughout the study. So we have done our entire extent of our clinical development program has been with steroids along with Duvyzat.
There are a few questions about the dosing. Would you mind, Scott, just going into the dosing schedule again?
Yeah. So dosing is, again, it's twice daily, and it is weight-based dosing. So at the low level, the label says, I believe, 10 kilograms or less. So that's about 22-ish pounds. We're looking at a dose of about 2.5 milliliters. And then we have a high dose. So individuals who are about 132 pounds, it goes up to 6 milliliters for the dose. That's the starting dose. And there's ranges in between that 2.5 and 6 milliliters, depending on what your weight is. And then, as stated before, you may need to have a dose reduction depending if there is thrombocytopenia or hypertriglyceridemia, and that dosing is also located within the US prescribing information.
Great. Have there been or will there be any outcome measures around upper extremity mobility or heart and pulmonary function?
So when we collect data, we are committed to presenting those data at upcoming conferences. Those do include pulmonary function outcomes as well as cardiac outcomes that we have for open label extension study for individuals who were in EPIDYS. In addition, we have our phase 3 study, the Ulysses study, that will be looking at upper limb function. The primary efficacy endpoint for the Ulysses phase 3 study, which again is a study in individuals who are non-ambulant. The primary efficacy endpoint is the PUL at 18 months.
Great. Does the drug need to be refrigerated?
No. Sorry, I was getting off mute.
I was waiting. I was anxiously waiting for that one. I was like,
I said no. Did it not come through? Sorry.
No, you're good.
No, I didn't hear Scott, but sorry about that, guys.
I was quick. It maybe didn't come through. Sorry.
Have there been any studies comparing the side effects to deflazacort of Duvyzat and deflazacort? Have there been any studies looking at the different side effects of both of them?
We have not conducted any studies looking at the side effects in any comparisons with any of the currently available treatments.
I'm making sure that we're getting all the questions here that we're typing in. Someone just asked if they asked once again if they could use Duvyzat with an exon skipping drug, and I think I'm going to reemphasize what Scott said, and like you should absolutely speak with your provider or your physician about that. I think that is a decision between you and your doctor that you should make. I think it would be an individual case basis, right? So we can't say yes or no to that, right?
Yeah, we can't make any recommendations. No.
And I can jump in and throw Scott and team a bone here as a non-ITF employee. When we think about these different approved therapies, it's first important to think about, one, what does the label say? Is your child or are you as an individual eligible based on what that label includes? Age, variant, all of those different things. But then we think about the different mechanisms of action, right? So we know that steroids are one group and they have a mechanism. We know that EPIDYS or a gene therapy has a different mechanism. We know that then the PMOs, so things like exon skipping drugs, have a different. And so I think, you know, what Scott said, and I'll also reinforce, is that when we see these different mechanisms of action, in theory, there is absolutely no reason that you couldn't be on two different classes of drug at the same time. And truly, we think that in Duchenne, it'll probably take a cocktail type approach with multiple different types of drugs that all have an additive effect together to make an impact. But there haven't been any head-to-head studies. And so we like to make decisions informed on data. And when there's no data, that's where we really have to lean on our prescribing physicians to help us understand what is deemed to be safe, appropriate, and then, you know, lean on things like the resources that Kelly has to offer. Can we get multiple high-cost therapies approved under a single plan? So it's a really, really great question. It's a question that we're asking too. What does this look like? And I think that we're all, as a community, going to learn a ton over the coming months. So we're grateful that we're all in it together.
Thanks, Rachel. There's a question about if someone has a cold or there's some sick with something else, should they stop taking Duvyzat while they're sick?
So it's not contraindicated if you're sick. I think you know, that's something that you should continue to remain on your dose. Conversations, again, I'll probably go back to this for a lot of my answers, but you need to have that conversation with your treating physician, depending on what ailments that you might have that you think could be at risk, but there's nothing contraindicated for colds or ailments.
Thank you. Are the low platelets temporary, and do most patients go back to the full dose?
So we don't have data on individuals going back to the full dose. What we do know is that individuals who had thrombocytopenia, they were managed by reducing their dose, and they were also included in the collection of all of the efficacy data, including the primary efficacy endpoint. I think it's important to note that you need to follow the reductions in platelets, and that being on a dose is important to make sure that you have it stabilized.
What is the timing on the extension and non-ambulatory trial results?
So our open label extension study is ongoing. We plan on presenting later this year at a conference on the safety data, as well as high-level efficacy data. That, again, as it's an ongoing study, we can continuously present, and we're committed to making sure that we're submitting abstracts to conferences and presenting manuscripts. So you should be able to see those over the course of the next several years. For non-ambulatory, our phase 3 study is currently enrolling. So when we have more information on when it's fully enrolled, we'll be able to share that and understand when we will actually be able to see the data for individuals who are non-ambulatory.
Thank you. And when do you anticipate releasing the cardiac and pulmonary data?
So that's something that we're currently analyzing our cardiac and pulmonary data. The hope is that we can be able to present that in an upcoming Congress in the coming, I would say, next calendar year, because we're already in September. Where we have previously presented our phase 2 study data with our pulmonary data. That's something we're looking to repeat. It's important to note that the open label extension, all people receiving or that were receiving placebo moved to be receiving Duvyzat. So we're now looking for external comparators, so that analysis is really important to really understand what the potential benefit there is for Duvyzat. And so that analyses are currently ongoing.
Thank you. I'm just scanning to make sure that I think we've covered all of the questions that have been asked. Does anyone else have any questions?
Lauren, can I
Yeah.
answer a question that was up? I believe it was Tracy Seckler. Said if something about if ITF ARC is working on getting coverage, should you still reach out to us? That is a great question. Thanks for asking that, Tracy. The difference with us is that we do this from an advocacy perspective. Our goal is to put as much pressure on the decision maker as possible to get a yes as quickly as possible. The delays in treating, as Stephanie said earlier, this can take up to 2 months. We think that's unacceptable. We also monitor trends, and we are going to use the regulators to our advantage. We've had regulators step in and overturn cases very quickly for us. We can also establish trends with the regulators. So if we see that there's one particular health plan that continues to deny, even though we continue to overturn it and get a win, then we can ask for a policy change, and we have a good basis to do it. So I would just, and again, we also, we take the cases that come to us and we develop a policy position, and we ask for better policies, because in our opinion, sick kids should not be getting denied an approved treatment with a rare disease. So we want that changed. Our goal is to work ourselves out of a job on that one. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Kelly, and I'm sorry for missing that question. Okay, so if no one has any additional questions, I think we can.
Actually, can I just make a quick comment? I think it's kind of dovetails on what Kelly was saying, but just the question about non-ambulatory data was couched related to the insurance process, and insurance is asking for that information. What I just want to ensure everyone knows is that that medical exception process, that appeal process, would apply to anyone who's non-ambulatory. We have had many, many non-ambulatory folks already gain approvals, usually via that exception or appeal process, even when they have a published policy that says it's for ambulatory only. So again, that process, and whether you work with ITF ARC and as well with Little Hercules, please do use all of your resources. But for sure, There is a path to access for patients who are non-ambulatory, and we will, of course, continue to work to develop data to support that in the longer term.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. There was one additional question on the time frame of expansion of label for youngsters under 6 years of age.
So that study is something for individuals who are less than 6 years of age. It's something that is required by regulatory agencies, specifically in the EU, and that's something that we have planned. I don't have the timeline to commit to today, but that's something once we have finalized those timelines with the regulatory agencies that we can come back to this group.
Thank you. And now a question, maybe Kelly or ITF, that either one of you can take this on. Have you seen any approvals for non-ambulatory folks who are already on exon skipping drugs?
Kelly, I think you're on mute.
The answer is yes. We don't have a ton because these Duvyzat cases just recently started coming into us, especially combination therapy requests. But yes, we have seen some approvals. But again, it comes down to your health plan, how you receive healthcare coverage, and that kind of dominates the beginning of the process.
Okay, not seeing any additional questions coming in. I think we can wrap this up. I want to thank the folks at ITF and Kelly at Little Hercules for joining us. This was a really informative webinar, and we really appreciate and value your time. And thank you so much for joining us. And the Zoom will be posted on the website. So if you can go back and look at the recording if you need to. But thank you, everyone, and we can close.